Mom, Samuel's voice cracked. Did you cancel the card? I set down the watering can, wiped my hands on my pants, took a slow breath. I'm asking you a question, he said, stepping closer. Lily's mother was at Nordstrom. She was about to buy a few things, and the card got declined. The machine ate IT'd. I in front of everyone. The sales associates looked at her like she was a criminal. Lily let out a soft sob. Mrs. Carter, my mom was so humiliated. She just wanted to see if the card worked. She didn't mean any harm. I pulled out my phone, opened the banking app, turned the screen toward them. The alert was still there. $198,800 attempted at Chanel, Beverly Hills. Declined. I watched their faces change. $200,000, I said quietly. At a luxury store. That's your definition of just seeing if it worked? Samuel's mouth opened and closed. He looked at Lily. She looked at the floor. The money, I continued, was for your wedding, for a house, for starting your lives together, not for her mother to buy handbags. Lily's tears dried up quickly. I noticed that. She didn't argue. She just stood there with her arms crossed, waiting for Samuel to fix things. That's what she always did. Mom, come on, Samuel said, his voice dropping into that pleading tone I'd heard 1,000 times before. We're family now. We should be able to help each other. Family. That word again. I looked at my son, really looked at him. He was 27 years old, standing in my living room, defending his fiance's mother's attempt to spend my life savings on a single shopping trip. He didn't see what was happening. He didn't see what I saw. The next morning, Lily's mother showed up at my door. Ruth Roberts looked nothing like she had at the engagement party. Back then, she'd been all smiles and compliments, telling everyone what a generous mother-in-law I was. Now her face was tight. Her eyes were hungry. She came with her husband and her son, a 22-year-old named Matthew, who had never held a job longer than 3 months. I'm so sorry, Ruth said, grabbing my hands before I could pull away. I'm just an old woman who got excited. I wanted to see the card. I didn't know it was such a big deal. She laughed. Actually laughed. My daughter is marrying into your family. We're all family now. You can't keep treating us like strangers. Matthew leaned against my doorframe, smirking. Yeah, Mrs. Carter. It's not like you need all that money. You're old. What are you even going to spend it on? I didn't respond to him. He wasn't worth the air. Samuel was in the kitchen, pretending not to hear anything. Mom, he finally said, let's just move past this. We talked about it. Lily's mom made a mistake. It's over. Mistake. $200,000 at Chanel was a mistake. I smiled at Ruth, at her husband, at Matthew. Of course, I said. We can move past this. They relaxed instantly. Ruth squeezed my hands again. Samuel let out a breath he'd been holding. But, I added, the money is for the house. I'd like to help you find one. Ruth's smile twitched. We can do that. 3 days later, Samuel and Lily dragged me to see a penthouse downtown. 2,000 square feet, floor-to-ceiling windows, a view of the entire city. What do you think, Mom? Samuel asked, his voice full of hope. Lily wrapped her arm around his. It's perfect for starting a family, and there's enough room for guests. She meant her mother, her father, her brother. It was also $2 million. Let's keep looking, I said. I saw Lily's jaw tighten. Ruth made a noise like she'd swallowed something sour. But I kept smiling. We looked at more apartments, a house in the suburbs, a condo near the beach. Every single one was out of budget. Every single one was also in Matthew's name. Ruth tried to hide it, but she was terrible at being subtle. Whenever we toured a property, she'd talk about how perfect it would be for Matthew's future, how close it was to the gym he liked, how the neighborhood was safe. She was buying her son a house with my money. But I didn't say anything. I just waited. On the 4th day of house hunting, I told Samuel I was tired and needed to rest. Take Lily and her family, I said. Look at a few more places without me. Tell me what you find. Samuel looked relieved. He kissed my cheek. Thanks, Mom. You won't regret this. I waited until they left. Then I went to the bank. I didn't go to my usual branch. I drove across town to one where nobody knew me. The teller was young, friendly, clueless. I withdrew everything. $860,000 transferred to a new account under a different name in a safe deposit box. A process that required 2 forms of identification and a face scan before any funds could be moved. Then I drove to my normal branch and canceled the card they had. The manager asked if I was sure. I told her I'd never been more certain about anything in my life. I got a new card. Same design, same color, same everything. I put $5,000 on it. That night, I handed the new card to Lily. Samuel stood next to her, smiling. Mom, this is amazing, he said. Thank you. I held out the card. Lily took it with both hands, her fingers trembling. The password is your birthday, I said. I changed it so you'd remember. Ruth was watching from the couch. I could see her practically vibrating with excitement. Her husband was pretending to read a magazine, but his eyes kept flicking toward the card. We'll find the perfect house, Lily promised. She didn't look at me when she said it. She was already looking at her mother. 3 days later, I got a notification on my phone. $150,000 attempted at Silverstone condos. Declined. I was making tea when it came through. I set down the kettle, watched the steam curl into the air. They'd gone straight to a property developer, pretended they were buying a small condo for Lily and Samuel. But the name on the purchase agreement was Matthew Roberts. I knew that because I'd called the developer before they arrived. Someone might try to use a card in my name. I told them, it's being handled. Just confirm the buyer's identity. They confirmed it. Matthew Roberts. Not Samuel Carter. Not Lily Roberts. Matthew. The 22-year-old with no job and no money and no future, trying to buy a home with his sister's mother-in-law's retirement savings. Ruth had called him. I'd heard it on the voicemail. Get to the office. We're doing this now before that old woman changes her mind. I saved that voicemail. I saved everything. Lily showed up at my door an hour after the transaction failed. She didn't pretend to be nice this time. Her eyes were narrowed. Her fists were clenched. Mrs. Carter, why is there only $5,000 on the card? I didn't invite her inside. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Because that's what's needed for a deposit, I said calmly. A deposit on what? The house you're supposed to be buying, with your husband, not your brother. Her face went pale, then red, then white again. Matthew needed a place to live. He's my brother. Family helps family. Family, I repeated. Do you even know what that word means? She opened her mouth to answer, but I was done listening. I closed the door. Through the wood, I heard her screaming. Your son will never forgive you. You'll die alone. You're a bitter old woman who can't stand to see anyone happy. Her voice was drowned out by sirens. I'd called the police 20 minutes earlier. They arrived just as she was trying to break the window. Ruth came the next day. She brought Matthew and her husband and 3 of Matthew's friends, the kind of people who wore leather jackets in July and smelled like cigarettes and secrets. They didn't knock. They pushed the door open. Where's the money? Ruth demanded. Behind her, Matthew cracked his knuckles. It was supposed to be intimidating. It was just sad. Get out of my house, I said. I'm not leaving until you give us what's ours. What's yours? Your daughter married my son. That doesn't mean my savings belong to you. You have so much, Matthew said, stepping forward. Why can't you just share? I didn't back up. I had 6 inches on him and 20 years of discipline. Get out. He laughed. Or what? I pulled out my phone. The screen was already glowing. Or I pressed this, I said. I've been on the line with 911 for 3 minutes. They've heard everything. They're 2 blocks away. I pressed the button. The sirens got louder. Ruth looked at her son, her husband, her screaming daughter. They were gone before the police reached the door. I didn't press charges. Instead, I called the bank and asked them to reverse the card charges and shut down every account with Ruth's name attached to it. Then I sat in my living room and listened to the recordings from hidden cameras I'd installed last year. The cameras I'd bought after Ruth made a joke at Samuel's wedding about being set for life now. At the time, I told myself I was being paranoid. Now I wasn't so sure. Samuel found me on the couch. He looked exhausted, lost, like a child who'd wandered into the woods and forgotten the way home. She's leaving me, he said quietly. Lily, she said, I'm a coward, a mama's boy who can't stand up to his mother. I didn't respond. She said if you'd just given us the money, everything would be fine. We'd be happy. She'd be happy. Would she? Samuel looked up. His eyes were red. What you mean? I pulled out the paper, the purchase agreement, the name that should have been his but wasn't. She was buying a house for Matthew, Samuel, not for you. He read the document. Read it again. His hands started shaking. Mom, I didn't know. I know you didn't. She said it was a place for us. A place where her mother could visit. I believed her. I put my hand on his shoulder. That's not your fault. But now you know. He dropped the paper, sat down next to me, put his head in his hands. Everything I thought was real. I didn't say anything. I just sat there, watching the tears drip through his fingers. 2 weeks later, I got a letter from the bank. Legal action initiated by Lily Roberts. She was suing me for $860,000. She claimed it was a gift. A family contribution. She said I'd promised it to her, that I'd given her the card, and that my decision to cancel the funds was a breach of oral contract. I almost laughed. Almost. I'd been a paralegal for 30 years before I retired. I knew how gifts worked in California. I knew how oral contracts worked. I knew what the bank statements showed and what they didn't. And I knew something Lily didn't. I had video. The trial was short. Lily's lawyer was a young man with an expensive suit and a cheap argument. He talked about family obligation and trust and how I'd led Lily to believe she had a future in this home. I sat in the witness box and watched him spin his story. Then my lawyer played the video. Ruth standing in my living room, threatening me. Matthew breaking down my door. Lily screaming through the window. The voicemail where Ruth told Matthew to go to the developer's office. The photos of the purchase agreement. The bank records showing Lily's attempt to transfer funds to her mother's account 3 days after I gave her the card. The text messages from Ruth demanding her share. Your Honor, my lawyer said, the plaintiff's claim relies entirely on the idea that this money was freely given, but all evidence shows it was taken under false pretenses. The defendant's son was the intended recipient. The plaintiff and her family acted in bad faith at every stage of this process. The judge looked at Lily. She looked back at him with tears in her eyes. But those tears didn't work this time. The case is dismissed, the judge said. The plaintiff's claims lack evidence. The court finds no oral contract existed. The defendant retains all rights to the money. I didn't smile. I didn't clap. I just stood up and walked out. 6 months later, I sold my house and moved to a smaller place near the coast. Samuel came with me. He'd broken things off with Lily shortly after the trial. It wasn't easy. He'd loved her, or thought he had. But sometimes love is just addiction, and sometimes addiction makes you blind. Now he was sober. We lived in a quiet neighborhood, close to the beach, close to the water, close to the smell of salt and the sound of waves. I found my peace there. But I always kept the recordings. Just in case. Because people like Ruth and Lily never really stop. They always think they're entitled to someone else's life. And sometimes, when you least expect it, they come back for more. But that wasn't the end. That was just the beginning. Because I've been planning something bigger. Something they didn't see coming. Something that started long before the card, before the threats, before the trial. Long before any of them knew who I really was. I wasn't always a paralegal. Before that, I was something else. But I buried that part of my life years ago, when Samuel was young and I needed stability and safety over everything else. The money I gave him wasn't my entire savings. It was just the part one was willing to show them. The rest was hidden in accounts under names they'd never find, companies they'd never heard of, investments that compounded interest like a slow-burning fuse. I'd learned early that people take what they see. They never look deeper. So I showed them what I wanted them to see, a retired paralegal with a modest home and a modest income, scraping together money for her son's wedding. Ruth believed that version of me. Lily believed it. Even Samuel believed it for a while. But the truth was, I'd been planning for decades. My husband left me when Samuel was 5. He didn't leave much. A small inheritance from his mother, a dusty house in the suburbs, and a drawer full of unpaid debts. I sold the house, paid the debts, kept the inheritance. Then I started investing. I wasn't an expert. I wasn't a genius. I just paid attention. I read the news. I followed the trends. I put money into things that seemed stable and pulled it out when they didn't. Over 20 years, that small inheritance grew into something I never told anyone about. Not even Samuel. I wanted him to build his own life, to work for his own success, to know the value of a dollar before he inherited anything. But then I met Lily and Ruth and Matthew. And I realized that if I didn't protect what I'd built, they'd take it all. Ruth showed up at my new house 3 months after the move. I saw her car pull into the driveway, watched her sit there for a minute, hands on the steering wheel, breathing slowly. Then she got out and walked to my front door. I opened it before she could knock. "Hello, Ruth." She looked older, smaller, wrinkled like an apple left in the sun. "You won," she said quietly. "You won everything." I didn't win anything. I just kept what was mine. My family is ruined. Matthew lost his girlfriend. Lily lost her engagement. I lost every friend I had because of the things you said about me. I didn't say anything. I just showed people the truth. She flinched like I'd slapped her. "I came here to ask you something." "Ask." She looked me in the eyes. "Why did you give Samuel the card? Why didn't you just keep the money hidden?" I didn't answer right away. I thought about it. The truth was, I'd known something about Lily and her family that I hadn't told anyone. I'd known about Lily's ex-boyfriend, about the lawsuit he'd threatened her with, about the compromising emails she'd sent to her former boss, about the 3 other men she'd been with before Samuel. I'd done my research. The moment I saw Lily's name on Samuel's phone, I'd hired a private investigator. That's what gave me the confidence to give them the card. Because if they tried anything, I had leverage. I had everything. But I didn't say that to Ruth. Sometimes I said, "You have to let people show you who they are." I gave them the card because I wanted to see if they were worthy of my trust. They weren't. Ruth's face twisted. "That's not fair. Life isn't fair." She opened her mouth to argue, but I was done. "You're not welcome here," I said. "If you come back, I'll call the police. If you contact Samuel, I'll send his lawyer the evidence I've been collecting. Do you understand?" She stepped back. And then she was gone. 2 weeks later, I received a letter from Ruth's lawyer. She was claiming I'd been dishonest about my financial situation. She'd found something. Someone had tipped her off about my other accounts. I read the letter twice, my heart pounding. Then I called my lawyer. "I need a restraining order," I said. "You'll need a reason." "I have one." The restraining order was approved within 72 hours. Ruth was prohibited from coming within 100 feet of me, my house, or my son. She was also ordered to pay my legal fees. That's when I knew I'd won. Not because of the money. Not because of the court. Because Ruth stopped showing up. She stopped calling. She stopped trying. For the first time in almost a year, I had peace. Samuel came to visit me that weekend. He brought his new girlfriend, a woman named Grace. Grace was everything Lily wasn't, quiet, honest. She didn't try to impress me with expensive gifts or flowery compliments. She just sat at my dining table and ate my cooking and talked about her job as a high school teacher. "Your mom's a good cook," she told Samuel when she thought I couldn't hear. "She's a good everything," Samuel said. I heard the pride in his voice. That was enough. But as I was washing the dishes, I noticed something strange. A car had been parked across the street for hours. I couldn't see the driver through the tinted windows. But I recognized the license plate. It was Ruth's. I grabbed my phone and called the police. They arrived within minutes and knocked on the car window. Ruth got out, shaking. "I wasn't doing anything," she said. "I was just sitting there." "You're in violation of a restraining order," the officer told her. "I'm going to have to ask you to come with me." She looked at me through the window as they handcuffed her. And for the first time, I saw something I'd never seen before. Fear. Ruth served 28 days in jail. When she got out, she fled the state. I heard later that Matthew had been arrested for possession of illegal substances. Lily moved to another city and started over under a different name. I never saw any of them again. But that's not the end of the story. Because while all of this was happening, Samuel started to change. He started asking questions about my past. About my job. About the money. "Mom," he said one night, "why did you never tell me about the other accounts?" I set down my tea and looked at him. I didn't want you to feel entitled to anything. I wanted you to work, to build your own life. I understand that, but you let me almost lose everything because you didn't trust me. I thought about that. He was right. I've been so afraid of him becoming like Lily and Ruth that I treated him like he was already guilty. I'm sorry, I said. He nodded. I know. A week later, I told him the full truth. About my ex-husband. About the inheritance. About the investments. About everything I'd built over 20 years. All of it, I said, was for you, but only once I knew you were ready. Samuel listened without interrupting. When I finished, he put his hand on mine. I'm ready now. We went to the bank together. I signed papers, transferred money. Samuel's eyes went wide when he saw the numbers. It's yours, I said. All of it. I trust you. He hugged me so tightly I couldn't breathe. I won't let you down, he said. I know you won't. That was a year ago. Now Samuel runs his own business. Grace is his partner in everything. They're expecting a baby. And I've moved into a little cottage by the coast where I can see the ocean from every window. The money is still there. But it doesn't matter as much anymore. What matters is what I learned. The real revenge wasn't taking back the card. It was letting Samuel become the person I always knew he could be. And somewhere out there, Ruth and Lily are still wondering where it all went wrong. But I know the answer. They lost because they never understood that family isn't about what you can take. It's about what you can give. And I gave Samuel everything. Just not the way they expected. I was making dinner when my phone started buzzing. Not calls, not texts, notifications from every app I'd ever downloaded, all at once. I set down the knife and picked up the phone. #GreedyGrandma was trending locally. I clicked the link. There was a post from an account with no profile picture, but the name was familiar, Ruth Roberts. The post was long, angry, full of lies. My daughter was supposed to marry into a family with money. The grandmother promised $860,000 for their wedding and their future. Then she stole it back. She canceled the card while my daughter was trying to make a purchase. She humiliated us in court. She's a liar and a thief. Don't let her near your family. There were photos, old ones. A picture of me at the grocery store, taken from across the street. A picture of my house. A picture of Samuel with Lily, smiling like they were still in love. The post had been shared over 1,000 times. Comments poured in. Disgusting. Old people hoarding money while young couples suffer. She should be ashamed. That's elder abuse? No, that's elder entitlement. Someone should investigate her finances. My hands were shaking, but I didn't throw my phone across the room. I didn't cry. I didn't call Samuel in a panic. I took a breath. I poured myself a glass of water. Then I started saving everything. Every screenshot, every comment, every share, every hashtag. I saved it all to a folder I labeled Exhibit F. Samuel called 10 minutes later. Mom, have you seen? Yes. What are we going to do? Lily's mom is destroying your reputation. People are saying terrible things. My friends are asking me if it's true. Don't respond, I said. Don't post anything. Don't defend me. Don't even like a comment. But, Samuel, trust me. There was a long silence on his end. Okay, he finally said, I trust you. I hung up and called my lawyer. My lawyer's name is David. We've known each other for 15 years. He's not flashy, but he's thorough. Eleanor, he said when he answered. I was about to call you. I've seen the posts. I need you to send a cease and desist letter to Ruth Roberts. Immediate removal of all defamatory content, or we'll pursue legal action. Already drafted, he said, but she's using a burner account. No way to trace it to her directly. I have proof. I have her phone number from the court records. I have the email she used to contact the media last year. I can tie her to that account. David paused. How? Because she used the same phrasing in the post as she did in a text she sent me 6 months ago. Greedy old woman was her favorite insult. I have the text message. I kept it. Eleanor, you kept a text from 6 months ago? I keep everything. David left. I'll get the letter out tonight. But I have to warn you, even if we win, the damage is done. People remember the accusation, not the retraction. Then I'll give them a better memory. I spent the next 3 days doing what I do best, organizing. I pulled out every document from the trial, every bank statement, every text message, every voice recording, every camera clip. I arranged them in chronological order. Then I wrote a statement. Not an apology, not an explanation, a timeline. On February 14th, I gave my son a card with my savings. His fiance took it and gave it to her mother. Her mother attempted to spend $198,800 at a luxury store. The card was declined because I had already transferred the bulk of the money to a secure account. Why? Because I wanted to see if they would use the money responsibly. They didn't. They then attempted to buy a condo under her brother's name. They threatened me in my own home that I called the police. They sued me and lost. The court ruled in my favor. I have proof of all of this. If you want the truth, look at the court records that they're public. I attached every piece of evidence that was legally permissible. Then I posted it on my own social media account. No dramatic language. No angit. Just facts. Within 24 hours, the narrative flipped. People started sharing my post. Wait, I read the court documents. She's telling the truth. The mother-in-law tried to steal almost $200,000? That's insane. Why is everyone blaming the victim? Then someone found Ruth's criminal record. It wasn't much. A misdemeanor from 20 years ago, a dismissed charge for writing bad checks, but it was enough. So this woman has a history of fraud, and we believed her? Then someone found Lily's old employer. A former boss gave an interview to a local blog. Lily Roberts was terminated for misconduct. She accessed company funds without authorization. We chose not to press charges, but she was absolutely not trustworthy. The tide turned completely. Ruth's post was deleted within hours. But I had already saved everything. Ruth called me 3 days later. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Eleanor, please. I'll do anything. Just get them to stop. My life is ruined. I can't go outside. People are sending me threats. Please. I listened to the voicemail twice. Then I deleted it. David sent Ruth a letter demanding a public retraction and a formal apology. She didn't respond. Instead, she went to a local news station and gave an interview, crying on camera, saying she was the victim of a smear campaign. The news station aired it. The next morning, my lawyer filed a defamation lawsuit against her. The lawsuit included every piece of evidence I collected. And it included a demand for her phone records, her email logs, and her social media activity for the past year. She'd have to prove she didn't post those things. She couldn't. 2 weeks later, Ruth's lawyer called David. She wants to settle. She can issue a full public apology, remove all online content, and pay Eleanor's legal fees, plus a donation to a charity of Eleanor's choosing. What about punitive damages? Eleanor doesn't want damages. She wants the truth. The settlement was signed the next day. Ruth posted a video apology on the same account where she'd started the smear campaign. I made false statements about Eleanor Carter. I exaggerated events. I was wrong. I deeply regret my actions and apologized to her and her family. She looked miserable in the video. I didn't feel sorry for her. But I didn't feel vindicated either. I just felt tired. Samuel came over that weekend. We sat on my porch, drinking coffee, watching the clouds. Mom, he said, you handled it like a pro. I would have lost my mind. Anger doesn't win, I said. Evidence wins. He nodded. I'm learning that. How's Grace? He smiled. She's good. She's been helping me with the business stuff. She's smarter than I am. That's not hard. He laughed. Thanks, Mom. We sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Samuel said, I found something in Dad's old papers. I stiffened. He'd never talked about his father before. Not really. Not since the divorce. What did you find? A letter, addressed to me, from him. I turned to look at him. His eyes were red, but he wasn't crying. He wrote it before he died. He said he was sorry. He said he wished he'd been a better father. And he said there was something he wanted me to have. Samuel pulled out a folded piece of paper from his pocket. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Messy, sloppy, my ex-husband's. Did you read it? I asked. Yeah, the IT says there's a trust, a secret trust he set up when I was born. He never told anyone, not even you. The money is in a bank in another state. It's been accumulating interest for 28 years. I felt my heart stop. A trust. Yeah, and it's mine, but I need your signature to access it, because you are his next of kin. I stared at him. I never knew, I said. He never told me. Samuel shrugged. Maybe he wanted to keep it hidden. Maybe he didn't trust himself with the money. I don't know, but it's there. He handed me the paper. I read the letter. Dear Samuel, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I know I wasn't a good father. I know I left you and your mother too early, but I loved you. I always loved you. I put away money for you. A small amount every month. IT added up that I wanted you to have it when you were ready. Trust the attorney, Mr. Harrison. He'll know what to do. I folded the letter carefully. Are you going to claim it? I asked. Only if you say it's okay. It's yours, Samuel. It was always yours. The next week, we drove to the trust attorney's office. Mr. Harrison was an old man with white hair and a gentle smile. Mrs. Carter, he said, shaking my hand. I'm so glad you came. Your husband was a client of mine for many years. He was very specific about this trust. I sat down. Samuel sat next to me. How much is in it? Samuel asked. Harrison smiled. Let's see. He opened a file. Read the numbers. $520,000, he said, after taxes. Samuel's jaw dropped. That's amazing, he said. He wanted you to have a future, Harrison said. He knew he couldn't provide it while he was alive, so he made sure you'd have it after. I felt tears welling up. I'd spent years resenting my ex-husband, years thinking he'd abandoned us, years believing he didn't care. And now I knew the truth. He'd been saving, planning, waiting. I never knew, I whispered. Neither did I, Samuel said. After the meeting, Samuel and I sat in the car. He was quiet for a long time. Mom, he finally said, do you think Dad ever loved me? Yes, I said without hesitation. Ida. He just didn't know how to show it. Samuel nodded slowly. I want to use some of the money to start a scholarship, he said, for kids whose parents are absent, like Dad was, so they know someone cares. I put my hand on his. That's the most beautiful thing you've ever said. But that wasn't the only surprise. A week later, I received a call from Grace's mother. She was crying. Mrs. Carter, I need to tell you something about my daughter, about how she came to be in our lives. I listened, and what she told me changed everything. Grace wasn't Grace. Her real name was Grace Mitchell. She'd been adopted at the age of 3. Her biological father had been a man who died before she was born. A man named Richard Mitchell. Richard Mitchell was my ex-husband's best friend. The man who had died in the same car accident that nearly killed my husband. The accident that broke our marriage. The accident that led to the divorce. Because my husband had been driving. He'd survived. His best friend hadn't. And Grace was the orphan he'd left behind. My ex-husband had been paying for her care secretly, all these years. Through a trust. Through lawyers. Through anonymous donations. When Grace turned 18, the payment stopped, and her adoptive parents never knew who had sent them. But Grace had known. She'd found letters in her adoptive mother's attic. Letters from my husband, apologizing, explaining, promising to watch over her. She'd never told anyone. Not even Samuel. She just quietly found a way to meet him, to fall in love with him, to marry into the family that had been supporting her all along. And when I told her that her father was Richard Mitchell, she cried for an hour. He would have loved you, I said. She hugged me so tightly I couldn't breathe. But I didn't tell her everything. Because there was one more piece of the puzzle. One more truth I discovered while I was investigating Ruth. Something that changed how I saw my husband. Something that made me question everything I thought I knew about her past. And it had nothing to do with Grace. It had to do with the accident itself. I didn't sleep that night. After Grace left, after Samuel went home, I sat in my living room with the letter from my ex-husband's attorney in my hands. Richard Mitchell. The name echoed in my head like a ghost. I remembered Richard. He was tall, loud, always laughing. He'd been my husband's best friend since college. They'd worked together, vacationed together, gotten drunk together at every holiday party. And then he died. The accident happened on a rainy night in October. My husband was driving. Richard was in the passenger seat. They hit a patch of black ice and spun into a tree. Richard died instantly. My husband survived with a broken leg and a shattered conscience. He never talked about it. Not once. Not even when I asked. Not even when the nightmares woke him up screaming. I thought it was guilt. Now, I wasn't so sure. The next morning, I drove to the county courthouse. I'd been there before during the trial with Ruth, but this time, I wasn't looking for legal documents. I was looking for the accident report. The clerk at the records office gave me a strange look when I asked for it. Traffic accident from 28 years ago? That's old. We might not have it digitally. I'll take whatever you have. She disappeared into the back and returned 20 minutes later with a faded manila folder. I opened it in the lobby, my hands trembling. The report was short. A single page. The responding officer had noted the weather conditions, the road conditions, the speed of the vehicle. But there was something else. A witness statement. A woman had been driving behind them. She'd seen the whole thing. She said the car didn't spin out on ice. She said it swerved. Purposefully. I read the witness statement 3 times, but the words didn't change. The vehicle appeared to change direction intentionally. It jerked to the left before impact. I saw the driver's face. He was looking at the passenger, not the road. My husband had been looking at Richard. And then he'd swerved. I felt the room tilt. I sat down heavily on a plastic chair and stared at the report. This wasn't an accident. This was something else. I called David, my lawyer, from the parking lot. I need you to find out everything you can about the accident that killed Richard Mitchell. My ex-husband was driving. I need to know if there were any other investigations, any lawsuits, anything. David was quiet for a moment. Eleanor, what are you looking for? Truth, I said. 3 days later, David called me back. I found something, he said, but it's not what you think. What is it? There was a lawsuit, filed by Richard Mitchell's widow. She claimed your ex-husband was responsible for the accident, but she dropped it 2 months later. The case was sealed. Sealed? Why would it be sealed? Because someone paid her off. A lot of money. And that someone was your husband's employer at the time. I felt the pieces clicking together like a puzzle I didn't want to solve. His employer, I repeated. Eleanor, your husband worked for a company called Mitchell and Associates. I froze. Richard's last name was Mitchell. I'd always assumed Richard was just a friend, a colleague, someone who happened to share a name with the company's founding family. But I'd never asked. I'd never wanted to know. Eleanor, are you there? Richard Mitchell was the founder's son, I said slowly. Yes, and your husband was his driver, his assistant, and his best friend. The company paid Richard's widow to keep quiet about the accident, and your husband, he left with a settlement. A significant one. The inheritance. The trust. It wasn't from my husband's savings. It was blood money. I called Samuel that night. He came over within an hour, his face pale. What's going on, Mom? You sounded scared on the phone. I told him everything. The accident report, the witness statement, the sealed lawsuit, the settlement. Samuel listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. So, Dad, he finally said, killed his best friend. Maybe. I don't know. The witness said he swerved. But that was one person's opinion. She might have been wrong. Mom, Samuel's voice was flat. Dad never talked about that night. He never talked about Richard. He never even mentioned the accident to me that I was 5 years old when it happened. I don't remember any of it. Neither do I. He was hiding something, Mom. He must have been. I didn't want to believe it. But the evidence was right in front of me. The next week, I hired a private investigator. Her name was Karen. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed, and she didn't ask questions. Find out everything about the Mitchell family, I said. The accident, the settlement, the widow, anything you can find. Karen nodded. I'll get back to you in a week. She was back in 3 days. Eleanor, I found the widow. She's alive? Yes. She remarried. She lives in Portland, but I talked to her. I leaned forward. What did she say? Karen's expression was unreadable. She said the settlement was her idea. She didn't want to go to court. She didn't want the publicity. She just wanted the money. Did she know what happened? In the car? She said your husband told her it was a freak accident. Black ice. No time to react. She believed him. Then why did she sue? Karen paused. Because someone told her it wasn't an accident. Someone told her your husband was responsible, and that someone was his employer. Mitchell and Associates. Yes, they wanted her to sue. They wanted to use the lawsuit to threaten your husband, to keep him quiet. Keep him quiet about what? That's where it gets interesting. Karen pulled out a folder. The company was in trouble, financial trouble. Richard Mitchell had discovered something. He was planning to expose it. And the day before the accident, he told your husband what he'd found. Did he tell him? Yes. Karen looked at me. Your husband knew exactly what Richard was planning to expose. And the next day, Richard was dead. I spent the night lying awake, staring at the ceiling. My husband had known something. Something that got Richard killed. And he'd taken that secret to his grave. But he'd left me something. A trail. The trust. The inheritance. The letter. He'd wanted Samuel to find out the truth. But he'd been too afraid to tell me himself. The next morning, I called Grace. She met me at a coffee shop near her school. What's going on? She asked, settling into her chair. You sounded urgent. I told her about Richard, about the accident, about the company, about the settlement. Grace's face went pale. My father died in an accident. Yes. And your husband was driving? Yes. She put her hand over her mouth. My adoptive mother told me he was a good man. She said he loved me. She said he'd always wanted to protect me, but she never told me how he died. Because she didn't know, I said. I didn't know until yesterday. Grace was quiet for a long time. I need to know the truth, she finally said. About my father, about what happened. If there's something hidden, I need to find it. I understand. And I need to know if your husband was involved. I met her eyes. I think he was, I said, but I don't know how. Not yet. Karen called me the next day. I found something else, she said. A letter. Richard Mitchell wrote it to his wife before the accident. He said if anything happened to him, she should give it to someone she trusted. Did she give it to anyone? She gave it to me. Karen came to my house that evening. She pulled out a yellowed envelope, creased and worn. I'm giving this to you because you deserve to know the truth. But I want you to be careful. This isn't just about a car accident. This is about something bigger. I took the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten, messy, desperate. I found the records. They've been hiding it for years. The company is built on stolen money, stolen lives. If you're reading this, I'm probably dead. Don't let them win. Tell the truth. Richard. I read it twice. Then I put it down and looked at Karen. What did he mean by stolen money? The company was laundering money for a criminal organization, Karen said. Richard found the proof. He was going to go to the police, and they silenced him. Who's they? His own family. His brother, Thomas Mitchell. He was the CEO. He knew everything. Thomas Mitchell is still alive. Karen nodded. He's the head of the company now. Billionaire. Untouchable. I sat down heavily. This was bigger than I'd imagined. This wasn't just about my husband. This was about a conspiracy. A murder. A family that had destroyed my husband's soul. Eleanor, Karen said, you need to be careful. Thomas Mitchell has power. He has money. And he has no problem crushing people who get in his way. So did Ruth, I said. She's gone. Ruth was small time. This is different. I looked at the letter again. Richard Mitchell had died trying to expose the truth. His wife had been silenced. My husband had been broken. And Grace had been orphaned. I don't care, I said. I'm not stopping. The next morning, I went to the bank. I transferred a significant amount of money from my hidden accounts to a new account. An account I'd created for Grace. If Thomas Mitchell was going to come after anyone, it would be me. But I was going to make sure Grace was protected. And Samuel. And everyone else I loved. But there was one more piece of the puzzle. One more thing I needed to do. I needed to confront Thomas Mitchell. In person. I called his office, left a message, gave my name. His assistant called back an hour later. Mr. Mitchell will see you at 3 o'clock tomorrow. I felt the fear rise in my chest. But I pushed it down. I'd face down Ruth. I'd face down Lily. I'd face down the entire Roberts family. Thomas Mitchell was just another bully. And I knew how to handle bullies. I walked into his office the next day. He was waiting for me, tall, gray-haired, smiling. Eleanor, he said, extending his hand. I've heard so much about you. I didn't take his hand. I know about the accident, Thomas. I know about Richard. I know about the money laundering. His smile faltered. Just for a second. I don't know what you're talking about. I have proof. I have the letter. I have the witness statement. I have everything. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he laughed. You think you can threaten me? I've been in this game longer than you've been alive. You have nothing. I have your brother's letter. His face went pale. Richard's letter to his wife. He knew what you did, Thomas. He knew everything. And he wanted the truth to come out. Thomas sat down heavily. You're making a mistake. No, I said. You made the mistake 28 years ago when you killed your brother. He didn't deny it. He just stared at me with empty eyes. What do you want? I want the truth. I want you to confess. And I want you to pay for what you did. Thomas laughed again, but this time it was hollow. You'll never prove it. I smiled. I already have. I pulled out my phone and pressed play. The recording was clear. His words, his confession. You killed your brother. I did what I had to do. For money. For survival. Thomas's face went white. You recorded that? Yes. That's illegal. No, I said. I got your consent before I walked in. There's a sign on the wall. Did I read it? All conversations are recorded for quality assurance. You're an assurer, Thomas. And I have the quality right here. He lunged across the desk. But I was already walking out the door. The security guards were waiting. Mr. Mitchell, one of them said, the police are here. Thomas froze. I turned around and looked at him. I called them before I walked in. I said, they've been waiting. He stared at me. For the first time, he looked afraid. And then I walked away, knowing I'd won, but knowing it wasn't over. Not yet. I didn't sleep that night either. But this time it wasn't from fear. It was from the adrenaline of watching Thomas Mitchell's face crumble when the police walked through his office door. I'd stood in the hallway and watched them handcuff him. I'd listened to him sputter and protest. I'd seen the security guards look away, ashamed. And then I'd walked out. But I wasn't naive. Thomas Mitchell was a billionaire. He had lawyers. He had connections. He had people who would do anything to protect him. One recording wasn't enough. Not yet. The news broke the next morning. Billionaire CEO arrested for murder of brother in 28-year-old cold case. The headline was everywhere. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Samuel called me before I'd even finished my coffee. Mom, the news. Did you? Yes. Did you do this? I helped. There was a long silence on his end. Mom, this is insane. This is my father's boss. This is the man who made my father's life miserable. Your father was involved, Samuel. He knew what happened. He kept the secret for almost 3 decades. But he didn't kill Richard. Thomas did. We don't know that for sure. Not yet. But we're going to find out. Grace arrived at my house an hour later. She looked pale and shaky, but her eyes were sharp. Eleanor, I saw the news. Thomas Mitchell is in custody. Is that because of you? Because of us, I said. What does this mean for me? I took her hands. It means justice is coming. For your father, for your family, for everyone Thomas Mitchell hurt. She started to cry. I never imagined I'd see this day. My father's killer arrested. It's not over yet, I said, but we're getting closer. 2 days later, I received a letter. Not by mail, by courier, hand-delivered by a man in a black suit who didn't say a word. I opened it in my kitchen, my hands steady. It was from Thomas Mitchell's wife, Lydia Mitchell. Eleanor, I know who you are, that I know what you've done, and my husband is in jail because of you, and I want to know why I'm not like him, that I was a victim too. Please, let me explain, let me help. There was a phone number. I stared at the letter for a long time. Then I called David. What do you think? I asked. Thomas's wife. She's been married to him for 35 years. She knew about the money laundering. She knew about Richard's death. She's not innocent. Then why is she reaching out? Because she's scared, David said. Thomas is going down, and she doesn't want to go down with him. I looked at the letter again. I'm going to meet her. Eleanor, that could be a trap. I know, but if there's even a chance she knows something useful, I have to take it. I met Lydia Mitchell at a hotel in the city. Neutral ground. Public place. She was elegant, silver-haired. Her hands were shaking. Thank you for coming, she said. Why did you want to meet? Lydia took a slow breath. I want to tell you the truth. About Richard. About Thomas. About everything. I didn't respond. I just waited. Thomas didn't kill Richard, she said quietly. I stared at her. He didn't. Richard killed himself. I felt the floor tilt. What are you talking about? Lydia's eyes were wet. Richard was in debt, gambling. He lost everything, the company money, his reputation, his family. Thomas found out and confronted him, and Richard, he couldn't face the shame. He drove the car off the road on purpose. That's not what the witness said. The witness was paid off by Thomas. He didn't want anyone to know Richard was a gambler. He wanted to protect the family name as, he made it look like an accident. An accident that Thomas was responsible for. I sat back in my chair. It didn't make sense. The letter, the evidence, the recording. Why would Thomas confess to killing Richard if he didn't do it? Lydia looked at me sadly. Because you gave him a choice. Either he confessed to murder and went to jail with a shred of dignity, or he told the truth, and the world found out that his brother was a thief who killed himself out of shame. I was silent. Thomas Mitchell is a proud man, Lydia continued. He would rather be seen as a killer than a coward. I walked out of the hotel in a daze. If Lydia was telling the truth, then everything I thought I knew was wrong. Richard Mitchell hadn't been murdered. He'd killed himself. And Thomas had spent 3 decades lying to protect his brother's reputation. The company records Richard had found, this stolen money, it wasn't from a criminal organization. It was Richard's gambling debts. Millions of dollars siphoned from the company accounts, hidden in offshore banks, lost at poker tables and horse races. Richard had been a thief. And my husband had known. He'd known, and he'd kept the secret because Richard was his friend, his employer, the man who'd given him a job when no one else would. And then Richard died. And my husband spent the rest of his life carrying the weight of that guilt. I called Karen, the investigator. I need to know the truth, I said, about Richard Mitchell's finances, his gambling, his debts, everything. I'll look into it. She called me back within 24 hours. Eleanor, it's true. Richard Mitchell was deep in debt. He'd been stealing from the company for years. Thomas found out right before the accident. Was Thomas the one who found out? Yes. He confronted Richard the night before the accident. So Richard didn't want to be caught. No, he was going to prison. He'd lost everything, and he couldn't face it. I was silent. One more thing, Karen said. Your husband knew about the gambling. He'd been helping Richard hide it. He was the one who set up the offshore accounts. I sat down heavily. My husband had been an accomplice. Not to murder. To theft. To covering up his best friend's crimes. And when Richard died, he'd taken the secret to his grave. But he'd left a trail. For Samuel. For Grace. For me. He'd wanted us to find out. But he'd been too ashamed to tell us himself. I went to see Grace that evening. She was sitting in her apartment, staring out the window. Grace, I said softly, I need to tell you something. About your father. She turned to look at me. What about him? He wasn't a perfect man, Grace. He had problems. Gambling. Debt. He made mistakes. Grace's face was unreadable. What kind of mistakes? He stole money. From his company. He was going to be caught. And instead of facing the consequences, I couldn't finish the sentence. Instead of what? Grace asked. I took a deep breath. He drove his car into a tree. On purpose. Grace stared at me. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then she said, very quietly, I know. You knew. My adoptive mother told me, Grace said. She found letters from your husband explaining everything he'd been paying for my care all those years because he felt responsible. He said my father was a good man who made bad choices, and he wanted to make it right. So you knew this whole time? Yes. I didn't tell you because I didn't think it was my place, and I didn't want to bring up painful memories. I was silent. Eleanor, Grace said, I've come to terms with who my father was. He wasn't perfect, but he was still my father, and he loved me. That's what matters. I felt tears in my eyes. You're a remarkable woman, Grace. She smiled sadly. I learned from the best. That night, I sat in my living room and thought about everything I'd learned. Thomas Mitchell wasn't a murderer. He was a man trying to protect his family's reputation. And my husband wasn't a killer. He was a man who'd made a terrible mistake and spent his life trying to atone. The lies had been built on lies. And now, the truth was finally coming out. But it didn't change anything. Richard Mitchell was dead. My husband was dead. And Grace had been orphaned because of secrets that should have been revealed decades ago. The next day, Thomas Mitchell's lawyers contacted me. They wanted to drop the charges. They wanted to make a deal. I told them to call David. He's not going anywhere, I said. He confessed. On tape. Even if he didn't do it, he confessed. That confession was coerced, the lawyer said. Was it? I asked him a question. He answered. There's no coercion in the recording. He said the words himself. The lawyer was silent. Eleanor, this man has a family, a business, a legacy. Don't destroy it because of a misunderstanding. His brother destroyed himself because of his own actions. Thomas has spent years covering it up. That's not protection. That's obstruction. And it's time it ended. The lawyer hung up. A week later, Thomas Mitchell was charged with obstruction of justice. Not murder. Obstruction. And the company began an internal investigation into Richard's financial crimes. Grace was called as a witness. She testified about her father's gambling, about the letters from my husband, about the hidden accounts. And in the end, Thomas Mitchell pleaded guilty to obstruction. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison and $100,000 in fines. The company was forced to pay back the stolen money. And Grace received a settlement. Not from the company, from the Mitchell family. A formal apology, a financial contribution, a recognition that they'd failed Richard's child. Grace came to see me after the hearing. It's over, she said. It's over, I agreed. I don't know how to feel. My father was a thief, but he was also my father. I loved him. You can love someone and still hold them accountable for their choices, Grace. That's not betrayal. That's honesty. She nodded slowly. Thank you, she said, for everything you've done. You did this, Grace. Not me. You faced the truth. That takes strength. She hugged me, and I felt something lift in my chest. Something that had been weighing me down for months. But it wasn't over. Not really. Because there was one more secret. One more discovery I hadn't made yet. And when I did, it would change everything. Again.